Hello everyone, welcome back. Thanks for being here. I reorganized my shelves today, so that's why everything looks a bit different. You may not even be able to notice it or see it, so I think I said that for no reason. But welcome back. Today we're gonna be doing my dog is barking. Today we're gonna be doing every single book I read in the year of 2020. Now a lot of you may be thinking, Maddie, what the hell? I thought that the end of the year content was out. I thought so too, until, you know, I was debating on posting this video or not because I didn't even start BookTube until about October of last year, so you guys didn't even know who I was until October of last year. So I was like, they probably wouldn't even care about what I read for most of last year because they didn't even know who I was, but then I kind of realized that maybe that'd be kind of fun for you guys to see like how my reading has evolved from not being as much into BookTube, transforming into being a lot into BookTube and creating my own BookTube channel. So yeah, I feel like this is gonna be a fun video to do, a bitch of a video to edit. I'm going to be putting pictures of every single book cover that I read, which is gonna take a long time because, as you know, book covers aren't the easiest things to find that'll fit into iMovie. So we're gonna do it. It's gonna be fun. I'm not gonna be going into a lot of synopses or anything. That would just take way too long. I'll be giving a brief explanation about why I gave it the star rating that I did and what I thought about it, and then we're gonna move on. So yeah, let's get into it. I read 118 books in the year of 2020, which is amazing. I really feel that the reason is because of the fact that the pandemic happened and I had nothing to do. So I put my goal last year to 100 books, so I surpassed that by 18 books. Amazing, loved that. This year I'm doing awful, but we're not gonna talk about that too much because we're going back into 2020 for a bit. So yeah, I will be getting into everything. I'm gonna be looking at my phone at the good old Goodreads year read in 2020, which, by the way, I always keep my Goodreads linked in every single one of my videos, so if you want to friend me, follow me on there and we can look at each other's progress for the year, so feel free to. Okay, so the first book I read last year was The Lightning Thief, the first book in the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan. Obviously gave it 5 stars. It was a reread for me. This is my second time reading the series, which I actually want to read the rest of it because I've only read up to the 3rd book, so I need to get on that. I want to finish rereading that series because it is so good. One of my favorites of all time. Loved it. Next I read Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This is a thriller novel. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but looking at it now I think I may drop it down to like 3 because there were some really, really weird aspects to that book that were just not cute and also quite problematic. So I think I'm gonna drop that rating down to 3 stars, 2 stars maybe. That book I do not recommend. It's just very strange. It's a very odd book. Next I reread The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I gave it 5 stars, obviously. I think it's my 3rd spot for my favorite books of all time, which I know I need to make that video. I'm going to soon, I promise. But yeah, another reread for me. Next is I Find You in the Darkness by Alpha Holden. This is a poetry book. There's going to be quite a bit because I went through a phase and I wanted to finish all the books on my shelf that were poetry, and all of them ended up being like 2 stars or 1 star. So I realized that poetry or modern poetry is just not my thing. I gave that 3 stars. Next I read Thirst No. 2 by Christopher Pike, a really old vampire book that I have not finished yet. I'm on the 3rd book in the series now. I read the 1st book when I was like 12. I've been wanting to read all the series, or finish all the series I read when I was 12 years old. Not the best decision I've ever made in my life, but definitely one that we're sticking with. Gave it 4 stars actually. That might have just been a mistake. Next I read Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyemi. This is a Snow White retelling, adult book, and I gave it 3 stars. I really didn't like it that much. I found it just to be weird and not really much like a Snow White retelling whatsoever. It was just a very strange book and I don't recommend it. Next I reread Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by Daniel Radcliffe. This I gave it 5 stars, obviously. It's my 2nd time reading the series. Trying to finish that too. Next was Evermore by Alison Noel. This is the 1st book in the Immortal series, an OG series once again. I gave it 3 stars. It's very cheesy, very corny, very much like someone equated, I think they equated it to Twilight in a way because of the romance in that book. Like, it's very much like a Bella and Edward romance. And I agree with that, but that doesn't mean that it's as good as Twilight. Not even close, because I still love Twilight to this day, but like, it wasn't good. And then I ended up rereading, no I didn't. I read Pumpkinhead by Rainbow Rowell. This is a graphic novel by her, which I gave 4 stars to. It was really cute. I did like it a lot. It the plot wasn't really there, but it was still a fun time. I think that I always end up giving graphic novels a bit more of a higher rating because of the fact that I don't really have to devote too much time to it. So they always end up getting a higher rating for me, so I think that's the reason why. And then I ended up reading Blue Moon and Shadowland by Alison Noel. It's the second and third book in the series. So I gave both of those, and I gave Blue Moon 4 stars. I gave Shadowland 3 stars. I need to finish out that series because I have the last 3 books on my shelves. I haven't gotten to them yet, but I'll be finishing them this year, hopefully. Next, I read Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron by Catherine Dewey. I loved this movie. That was like my favorite movie when I was a kid. So I had the novel, and it was like a 100-page book, not even, and I wanted to read it, and not even close to being as good as the movie was, honestly. Gave that 3 stars. Next we read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. 5 stars, obviously made it onto one of my favorites of the year for last year. I am so late to the game on this book, and I completely understand that, but I don't regret reading it at all. I actually recommended it to my best friend Lily, and she loved it too, so she is like, I got her obsessed with it, I'm obsessed with it, and I can't wait to, you know, go on with the series. I'm so excited. I still have to read the last 2 books in the series. Well, the other 2 books in the series, I should say. Next I read The Host by Stephenie Meyer. I gave this book 5 stars. Really pleasantly surprised by that book, honestly. I actually really enjoyed it. I listened to the audiobook for that book, and it was amazing. And I watched the movie. The movie was okay. The book was just so much better. And I think that there's supposed to be about 2 more series coming out in this... 2 more books coming out in this series, and it's been years. I don't think I should be making more books for the series. Also, I feel like it ended on a pretty good note. I feel like there doesn't need to be any more books, but whatever. Next we have Force Collector by Kevin Shinick. This is a Star Wars book. My boyfriend made me read this because he said it was so good. I gave it 4 stars. It was pretty good. I liked it. Not really much to say about it. I don't really like the Star Wars novels or the continuations about it. It's just something that doesn't really interest me, but my boyfriend asked me to read it, so I read it for him, so yeah. Next I read 4, a Divergent Story Collection. This is the 4 novella about the character Tobias Eaton. I gave it 5 stars. I actually really enjoyed the Divergent series. I didn't even finish the series until 2019, I think, because it took me so long to get to Allegiant, because I knew it was going to happen in Allegiant because someone spoiled it for me, so I kind of just like didn't want to put myself through that heartbreak, and it was heartbreaking, but the 4 novellas were really good. Next I read Humans of New York by Brandon Stanton. This is actually a picture book. I didn't really technically read it, but it's about a person who goes to New York and basically takes pictures of humans that he sees in the street and then asks them for like a few words about their life, and it was really, really sweet and cute and really heartwarming, and I gave it 5 stars. I really liked that photo collection that he did. Next I read A Map of Days, which is the 4th book in the which is the 4th book in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. I gave it 4 stars. It was good. This series is pretty good. It's very like different than anything I've ever read before, and I am upset that the last book is out and nothing else is coming out of the series because I haven't read it yet, but gave it 4 stars. Next we have Goddess of the Night by Lynn Ewing. I gave this book 3 stars. It is a very like corny, cheesy, old YA novel that wasn't really down for, but now I have like 13 books to read left in the series because I am the way that I am and I want to complete series, so fuck me, I guess. Next I read The Power of Six, which is the 2nd book in the Lorien Legacy series, a sequel to I Am Number 4, if you don't know what that is. I gave it 4 stars. Once again, read the 1st book when I was like 12. I'm reading the rest of the series now as a 20-year-old woman, so. Next I reread The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. This is a children's middle grade series, or a book about a porcelain rabbit and his life of being lost from his original owner and going to different owners and stuff, and this book is just so like cute and sad and heartwarming, and I just loved it. Like, I feel like everyone should read this book. I think that she also wrote Because of Winn-Dixie. I didn't read that book, so I'm not positive, but this book, if you're gonna read any book by her and you want to get back into middle grade or just read a middle grade novel, please read that book because it really is such a good book. Next I read The Throne of Fire, which is the 2nd book in the Kane Chronicles by Rick Riordan. This is his series about Egyptian mythology, which I ended up giving 4 stars. I really like that series. I think that it was super cute and really interesting and something that I haven't read before because I just love Rick Riordan so much. Like, anything with mythology I know I'm gonna like, so I always read everything from him or other authors that write about mythology, so that book was really good. And then next I read City of Bones, which is the 1st book in the Mortal Instruments series by Cassie Clare. Yes, I am just getting into that world in that series. I have so much to catch up on. I know I'm only the second book in the first series. I'm not doing it by series, I'm doing it by pub order, so I'll get to them eventually. It's gonna take me a long time. I gave that book 4.5 stars. It honestly, thinking about it now, I felt like I had to give it that rating because of the fact that everyone else liked it, but that book wasn't too good, honestly. I feel like they're gonna get better as it goes on, but I think the Mortal Instruments series isn't the best out of the entire, like, world, so I don't know. Next we have Why We Broke Up by Daniel Handler. This is Lemony Snicket, that's a pseudonym for him, I give it 5 stars. It's about two people who broke up, basically, and she's basically writing a letter saying why they broke up, and it was really good. I really did enjoy it, and it was cute and sad and everything in between, and it really brought me back to being a teenager and like going through breakups as a teen, because when you're when you break up as a teenager, that shit hurts more than like anything else in the world at that moment. Like, it sucks, and it really did like make me feel like recognized when I read that book, so I loved it. Next I read Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. 2 stars. Hated it. Need I say more? No. Moving on. Next was The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. 3.5 stars. Honestly, may drop it. I don't even know if it's important for me to drop it anymore because it doesn't make much difference, but like, this book made it onto my most disappointing books of 2020. Didn't like it. It was very disappointing to me, so. Next I read The Indigo Spell by Rochelle Mead. This is the 3rd book in the Bloodline series. I love this series. I love the Vampire Academy series. I love the Bloodline series. Like, it's my guilty pleasure. They are still so good to me, even though I read them when I was like 12, once again, but I'm just getting through the Bloodline series now. I love it. Adrian Ivashkov is like my main book boyfriend. I am so in love with him, so the fact that I'm finally getting a book where I have him in every single book as a main character, amazing, beautiful, everything that I ever wanted in my entire life. I just love it. Obviously a 5 star for me. I cannot wait to finish the series. Next I read Life and Death, which is the gender-bent Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. 2 stars. Didn't like it. It was so much more boring than the regular Twilight was, and it wasn't good. Next I read The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I gave this book 5 stars. It's a thriller book. I thought it was good. I think the only reason why I thought it was that good, honestly, is because it was my first thriller book, honestly. Like, ever, I think. But I liked it a lot, and I want to watch the show. Or is it a movie? I don't know, but it was good. I liked it. I know that A.J. Finn is a pretty problematic person, so that's why I haven't kept the book. That's why I haven't, like, talked about it much, because he is, like, quite an evil person, I think. So, yeah. Won't be reading anything more from him, but that book in itself was good. Next was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. If you know me, you know this book was my top book of all time. Like, it was replaced every other favorite book for me. I thought it was so amazing, and I'm so glad that I read it, and I cry every single time I watch the movie. I watch the movie so often now too, and I'm always like rereading that book, so I just love it. Next I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I gave this book 4 stars. I liked the Starlight Sea more than this book, obviously. Night Circus is pretty good. It just wasn't, like, the writing is what makes those books so good, and the plot wasn't really there. It was mostly just the writing and, like, really, like, flowery and, like, pretty setting and everything, and it was really good. But other than that, Starlight Sea took the cake for me more than this book did. Next I read The Beginning of Everything by Robin Schneider. This is a YA contemporary book. Gave it 3 stars. This book made me so angry. The girl main character made me so mad, and I hated her, and I could not get into the book because of that, so yeah. Next I read The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was so good. Definitely is an adult book, so if you want to read it, make sure that you are of mature age to read it, because it has a lot of adult themes in there, but it was heartbreaking, it was beautiful, it was so good, and the audiobook was so good for it too. I recommend it. Next I read Life Eternal by Yvonne Woon. This is the 2nd book in the Dead Beautiful series. 5 stars. It's like another guilty pleasure for me. It's about a group of people who go to a school. I'm not even going to explain it to you because there's just too much to talk about, but it is really good, and the romance kind of makes me angry, but everything else about the book is really good. Once again, it's a boarding school book, so I think that's why I love it so much, because boarding school books always are good to me no matter what. I just love that trope so much. Next we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I gave this book 3 stars. It's the thriller book. Also made it onto my most disappointing books of the year. Didn't like it. There's a lot of problematic elements to it, which I talk about in that video, so if you want to hear about it, go check it out there, because I can't really get into it here. Basically, the author didn't do a lot of good research when it came to mental health issues, which was anger-inducing, so that's why I don't like it. Next, I read Scythe, which is the first book in the Arc of a Scythe series by Neal Shusterman. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. I thought it was so good. The characters were amazing. Citra and Rowan have my heart. I am ready to finish this, or continue all the series, because I've only read the first book, but I'm so excited to read it. Next, I read the complete Persepolis novels by Marjane Satrapi. This is all 4 graphic novels of it, about a woman living in her life as through a child to being an adult, living in Iran and then going on different places to escape the war, and I gave it 4 stars. It was amazing. I think that it really puts into perspective a lot about what the history was, because it's not accurately taught in schools. I feel like, you know, living in America, people like to misconstrue things to make us look better in certain ways, and she didn't do that. I thought it was so good, and I really do recommend it if you want to learn more about Iran history and from an Iranian's point of view. Next, I read Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. Gave it 5 stars. I love that graphic novel series. It is definitely an adult graphic novel series, so proceed with caution, but it is a really good one. Next, I read Blood Heir, which is the first book in the Blood Heir trilogy by Amelie Wen Zhao. I gave this book 4 stars. This being her debut novel, it definitely had a lot of issues, but those are things that I can overlook because it is her first book, so I did like it, but hopefully those issues that I have with it get reconciled in the second book in the series once I actually get to reading it. So, yeah. 4 stars. Next, I read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought that it was so good. Really triggering. Definitely go in there with, well, if it's gonna trigger you, then probably don't read it, but if you can handle it, then it's a really amazing book. It is heartbreaking and really hard to get through, but once you get to the end of it, I mean, it really is just an amazing book, and I don't regret reading it. Not at all. I made it on my favorite books of the year last year, so love it. Next, I read Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said by Philip K. Dick. This is one of my favorite sci-fis of all time. Actually, one of the only sci-fis I actually enjoy, because the quotes in this book are so good. I have so many quotes that I have saved in my phone from this book. I thought it was so good. Rereading it now, because I reread it for the second time last year, I ended up giving it 4 stars instead of 5, because I think that maybe it was just my mood that I was in. I think I need to reread it now and think about how I feel about it in a better mind space, because I feel like I wasn't ready to reread it when I read it, if that makes sense. So it is a really good book, though. One of his only books I actually like, because I read Do Androids Remove Electric Sheep, and I hated that book. I hated it. So this is the only book I like by him. Next, I read 8th Grade Bites, which is the first book in the Chronicles of Vladimir Todd series by Heather Brewer. I gave it 4 stars. This is like a Harry Potter thing to me. Like, he's a chosen one. He has a found family. He's so cute, and I just loved that book. I only read the 2nd book now, so I'm on the 3rd book in the series. There's 5 books total. I am almost halfway through with it, but it's a really cute series, and I wish I read it when I was a bit younger, but yeah, it's a really cute series. I do enjoy it. Next, I read The Shortest Way Home by Miriam Parker. I gave this book 3 stars. It's an adult contemporary novel. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. It was just a little slice of life. Writing was okay. Everything was just okay about that book. So yeah. Next, I read 7,300 Days by Isabella Mente. Sorry. I gave that book 3 stars. It's a poetry collection, so once again, all those usually get 2 or 3 stars from me because I just don't like poetry, but I bought the book. I wanted to support her, so I read it, and I ended up thinking it was just okay, but yeah, I read it. Next, I read Children, Blood, and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. Loved it. 5 stars completely. One of my favorite YA fantasies of all time. Thought that it was so amazing. Made it on my favorites of last year as well. Next, I read Circe by Madeline Miller. Gave this book 4 stars. This made it onto my most disappointing list of last year, which is sad, but I did still enjoy it. It was just not what I wanted it to be for me, which is fine, but I did still like it a lot. Next, I read The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff. This is it's about Pooh and Taoism, basically, or like how Benjamin Hoff is using Pooh as a way to talk about Taoism. So I liked it a lot. I gave it 3 stars, and the reason why I gave it 3 stars is because of the fact that it was just like really cute, and it was interesting, but like it didn't really go into like too much detail. So it was just a cute little book that I read, and it was like a one-day read for me, and it was just fine, you know. Next, I read The Watchtower, which is the 2nd book in the Black Swan Rising series by Lee Carroll. This book I've never heard anyone else talk about on BookTube, which I actually do enjoy the series a lot. I think that it's really interesting. There's a lot of different like really cool aspects into it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I'm on the last book in the series, so I'll be finishing it this year sometime. Next, I read The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, and I gave that book 5 stars. This book made me cry so hard. I've only read the first 2 books, I read this and then Throne of Glass too, but that's the only thing I've read by her. But Sam Cortland has my heart. I sobbed so hard and I thought it was so good. Next I read, it's kind of a funny story by Ned Vizzini. I gave this book 4 stars. I feel like if I read this in high school I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but it was still very young and it was still very like cringy for me a little bit, but also talked about a lot of really important topics, and I did love the story itself. I feel like if I read it in high school it would have been my favorites of all time, but reading as like an adult it doesn't, but that's fine. Next I read The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. Once again, 5 stars. Need to finish that series out. Well, I've already finished it. Need to finish my reread for that series out. Yell at me if I don't, right? Next I read My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. If you know me, this is my favorite books of all time. Second book of all time. Second favorite book of all time now. I give it 5 stars. I love it. Please read it. Especially if you like Anxious People by him, or if you read anything else by him. Like, this book was just amazing. I love it. Next I read And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagik. This is a horror novel, my first ever horror novel, and my friend had said that it gave her anxiety attacks, and honestly it wasn't that scary. It was just freaky and it was kind of like unsettling, but it wasn't like scary. But I did give it 4 stars. There was a lot of really cool elements of that book. Like, there was certain like mixed media for parts of it, like, and the ending did really fuck me up a lot, but it was a really good book, but it wasn't like super duper scary. So if you're like a baby like me, because I can't handle like that kind of stuff, and I was fine, you're gonna be fine, I promise. Next I read She Just Wants to Forget An Empty Bottle Full of Stories by R.H. Sin. I feel like the trend for him is completely over with. Like, he was really famous on Instagram and now he's not, but yeah. Both got 2 stars. His poetry is not that good, honestly. Next I read Bad Girls Don't Die by Katie Allender. This is a YA paranormal fantasy book. Gave it 4 stars. Liked it. This is technically a reread for me because I read it when I was like 12 once again. I actually liked it a lot. Next I read Incarnate by Jody Mouse. This is the first book in the New Soul series. And I'm giving it like 3.75 stars. It was just okay. It honestly disappointed me a little bit, but it's an older YA book, so those usually aren't as good as the newer YA books, and I have to just like basically recognize that, you know, so. Next I read Strange Angels by Lily St. Croix. This is a YA fantasy book, the first book in like a 5-book series. I gave it 4 stars. I actually liked it a lot. It is like all the paranormal creatures that I really like in the books, so there's like vampires, werewolves, like demons, everything, and that's my favorite thing in the world to read about, so liked it. Next I read Scott Pilgrim Volume 1. I gave it 4 stars, but looking back at it now I feel like I should have given it way lower because there are so many problematic aspects to that book, like him being a 23-year-old man and dating girls in high school. It's not cute, and I feel like no one really talks about it that much, so yeah, it is problematic, and I feel like the only reason people like it is because of Michael Cera being in the movie and like it being like a whole thing, but the books, it was just not that good, and looking at it now kind of disgusts me a little bit, but yeah. Next I read Saga Volume 2 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is the second book in the Saga series. 5 stars once again. Next was Fang by James Patterson. This is the 6th book in the Maximum Ride series. I actually gave this one 4 stars. This is like the last book that I liked by him. After that, because I read James Patterson or the Maximum Ride series after that, and they all got like 2 stars. I hated everything after that, but this was the last good book in that series, and I miss it. Next I read The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is a middle grade fantasy series, or fantasy standalone. Gave it 5 stars. All my favorites of all time now. I thought it was so good. It is so cute. It is... I cried a lot. I recommend it. Next was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I gave this book 4 stars. Brought me back to my childhood days. Just loved it. Absolutely loved it. Next was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. 5 stars. Loved it. Do I need to go on? No, I'm not going to. Next I read The Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. This is the first book in the Monsters of Verity series. 5 stars. Loved it. It's my first Schwab book and I love her so much. Next was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. My boyfriend made me read this book because he loves it and I read it and I loved it too. I cried so much. Gave it 4 stars. Next was 18 Years by Madison Kuhn. I gave this 2 stars. Hated it. Next was You by Caroline Kepnes. Gave this 3 stars. Thriller book. If you know what it is, you know what it is. I didn't like it. It was not that good. Was on my disappointing list for last year as well. Next was Revealers by Amanda Marone. I gave this book 3 stars. Middle of the road YA fantasy. Wasn't that good, honestly. Next was The Son of Neptune, which is the 2nd book in the Heroes of Olympus series. I gave it 4 stars. Love it. Love that series. And I was so happy to be back in the Percy Jackson world, so this series is a really good one. Next I read The Devil Does Exist Volume 1 by Mitsuo Takanashi. I gave this book, or this manga, 4 stars. Loved it. It was so like drama filled and like everything that I was living for, and I loved it. It's like a very like guilty pleasure manga series for me. Next was Rooms by Lauren Oliver. This is a paranormal adult contemporary book. Gave it 2 stars. Didn't like it. Was on my worst books of 2020 list. So yeah. Next was Ninth Grade Slaves, which is the second book in the Chronicles of Latimer Todd series by Heather Brewer. Gave it 4 stars once again. Love that series. Next was Serpent Shadow by Kane Chronicles, which is the third and final book in the Kane Chronicles series. Gave it 4 stars. Really good ending to the series. I loved it. Really awesome series all around. Next was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Gave it 2 stars. Hated it. It's a YA contemporary / futuristic novel, and I didn't like it. Made it onto my least favorite books of the year last year, so hated it. Next was Drowned, A Mermaid's Manifesto by Teresa Davis. I gave this book 2.5 stars. Little poetry novel. Didn't like it. Next was Quidditch Through the Ages by Kenilworthy Wisp. Give it 2 stars. Didn't like it. I honestly don't like the Hogwarts library books at all, except for Beetle the Bard. That's the only book I actually liked, but everything else, it sucked. So, yeah. Next was Graceling by Christian Kishore. I gave this book 4 stars. It's a little YA fantasy series, and it was really good. I liked it a lot. Next was Hot Dog Girl by Jennifer Dugan. I gave it 3 stars. Just a weird little YA contemporary book, but it was sapphic, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. Next was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I feel like I'm the only person that actually liked that book, because I feel like everyone else hated it, but I actually liked it a lot. I didn't keep it. I'm never going to read it, but I did really like it a lot. Next, I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I gave this book 4.5 stars. Amazing. Loved it. So good. I don't know why it gets so much hate, but I just love it. Yeah. Next, I read Girls, Paper, and Fire by Natasha Neon. I gave this book 5 stars. Made it onto my favorites of last year. So good. It's such a good sapphic romance. I just fucking love this book. Next up, I read Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. I gave this book 3 stars. This book is pretty problematic. It like glorifies cheating, and I didn't like that. So I gave it 3 stars. Next up was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave this book 3.5 stars, which I feel like I'm the only person who actually didn't like this book that much. I thought that it was just okay. It really wasn't amazing. Yeah. Don't come for me. Next, I read Clock Dance by Ann Tyler. This is an adult contemporary book. I gave it 2 stars because I hated the main character so much. I just hated it. That book was not very good. Next, I read This Is Where It Ends by Mariyuki Nijkamp. I gave this book 3 stars. It's a YA book about a school shooter and the people's lives and how they're affected by it, and I didn't like the way that it talked about grief. I didn't like the way that there was like no emotion behind the book. It kind of just like wrapped up everything in like a Pretty Little Bow being like, oh, you know, we're grieving, but we're gonna be okay, and that's not the way that it is, so I didn't like that. Next, I read With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. I gave this book 4 stars. One of the better YA contemporary books I've read. I really liked it a lot. Next was Pandemonium by Lauren Oliver. I gave this book 4 stars. I love the series. I think that it's so good. Next was Stargazing by Jen Wang. This is a middle grade graphic novel series. Not series, it's a middle grade graphic novel, and I gave it 3 stars. I liked it, but I did say that I am not the target audience for that book because it is for middle grade people, and I feel like if people who are middle grade are gonna like the book a lot more than I did, so yeah. Next, I reread Twilight. I gave it 4 stars. Loved it. Still love that series so much. Next, I read A Curse of Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. Gave it 5 stars. Honestly, one of my new favorite YA series of all time. I think that it's so good, and the characters are just chef's kiss. Love them. Next, I read A Gentleman in Moscow by Mortoles. I fucking hated this book. I gave it 2 stars. What made my top least favorite book of last year. I hated it. Next, I read Torment, which is the second book in the Fallen series by Lauren Kate. Gave it 3 stars. Honestly, the series is not that good. It is like very cringy, and like there's so many problematic aspects to it, and I just didn't like it. Next, I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I gave this book 4 stars, which I feel like at this point in my life right now, it's gonna be a bit of a lower rating for me because I feel like I was just confused and I didn't like any of the characters, and they were all assholes, and I just I don't like it anymore. Yeah. Next, I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I gave this book 4 stars. It's a adult fantasy series, and I need a second book right now. Like, honestly do. The first 100 pages of this book kind of is really hard to get through, but once you get past those pages, it gets really good. But I need the second book. Please and thank you, Miss Leigh Bardugo. Next was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. 5 stars. Loved it. Amazing. Everything of that I wanted from the Night Circus and more. I just loved it. Next, I read Heart of Flames by Nikki Paprouse. This is the second book in the Crown of Feathers series. I gave it 5 stars. I love this series so much, and the second book was so good, even better than the first book, and I just wish that more people read the series. I think that it's so amazing. Next, I read This Time Will Be Different by Misa Sugiura. I gave this book 3 stars. It's a YA contemporary book, and I, like I said, don't really care about YA contemporary books anymore. They're just okay for me, and that's fine. Next, I read The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. I gave this book 4 stars. Thought that it was good, but a little bit disappointing for me. Next, I read More Than This of Patrick Ness. I gave this book 3 stars. Very disappointing for me. It was just okay. Next was Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. 4 stars. Loved it. The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. 3 stars. I want to rate it even lower now. Didn't like it. Next was What's Left of Me by Kat Jang. I gave this book 3.75 stars. Just okay for me. Next was The Karmas of the Birds by Ransom Riggs. This is the 5th book in the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. I gave it 4.5 stars. Loved it. The romance, awful. It's so bad. Next, I read Chamber of Secrets. I gave it 5 stars, obviously. Next was Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil by John Berendt. 1 star. Hated this book so much, and I've gone on many, many rants about this book, so I'm not going to do it again. Next, I read Charlie Bone and the Invisible Boy by Jane Nimmo. This is the 3rd book in the Children of the Red King series. 4 stars. Amazing middle grade series. Love it. Next, I read Old Magic by Marianne Curley. This is it's a YA fantasy standalone. I gave it 3.75 stars. Liked it enough to almost give it a 4 star. It was pretty good. Everything by Nicola Yoon. 3 star. It was just okay. Kingdom of Souls by Raina Barron. 4 star. Really loved it, but the pacing was a bit weird in that book, so I gave it 4 instead of 5. But still loved it. Next, Saga Volume 3. I gave it 4 stars. Once again, love that series. Next was The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton. I gave this book 3 stars. Very disappointing for me, honestly. Did not like it that much. Tithe by Holly Black. 2.75 stars. Didn't like it at all, honestly. Angel by James Patterson. Gave it 2.5 stars. Didn't like it. And Angel was the last book that I read in the year of 2020. So, yeah. Had to do it quite quickly because there was just so much to talk about. But yeah, I loved last year for me as a reading year. Nothing else is good about the year except my reading goal, because I exceeded my goal for myself, which is amazing for, you know, to do that for yourself. So I really did have a good year last year for reading. And yeah, so thanks for being here with me today, and hope that you enjoyed it. Yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.